Welcome everybody to the inventory planner session today on bundles, assemblies, and forecasting for their components. We're really excited about this session, one, because it's a frequent topic of conversation that we talk with users about all the time. And two, it's very timely because we rolled out some updates to the assemblies functionality in particular last week. So we're also going to cover that. So you'll get a preview overall of how bundles and assemblies are managed within Inventory Planner, and we'll look at the updates in particular. I'm Jill with Inventory Planner, introducing my colleague Basil for those of you who have not met him yet, but probably most of you have by now. So he is our in-house bundles and assemblies expert, so the perfect guy to dive into all of this functionality. So Basil, take it away.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, let's dig in. And let me know. I feel like I want to make sure my connectivity, I'm seeing like you're actually a little start and go up from my side, which is telling me that my audio might actually be a little spotty.
Yeah, the audio is okay. The video is snagging just a little bit. So maybe when you go to screen share, if you want to turn your video off, that might help.
Yeah, actually, what I'd like to do just to make sure, I do this sometimes with my calls, is just I'm gonna use the audio here from my phone. So if you could give our audience maybe just some hilarious jokes.
Oh, definitely ready with the jokes. How about
you have them ready?
Whole question actually, so that'll be better than any joke I'm going to come up with, I promise. So here we're just asking about if you're selling bundles, assemblies, or both, and we're going to get into more about what the difference is between those as well. Just kind of the short story is that bundles are like virtual groups of items. These are often referred to as kits as well. Assemblies, these can be referred to as BOMs, as manufactured items. They go by a lot of aliases, but things that need to be put together, they need some assembly time or some manufacturing time to create stock of those items that's distinct from the components. So quite a few people weighing in here. Almost have everybody.
All right. Yeah, good kind of combination.
All right, good. I think we have just about everybody. All right, so we'll share those results. So most of you doing both. So perfect. We've got something for you. So,
great.
All right. Perfect.
Can you hear me all right, Jill?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. And what I'm going to do here is go ahead and share my screen. Let me know when this shows up on your side, please.
Looks good.
All right, great. Welcome everybody. Yes, I'm Basil here from Inventory Planner. So what I'm going to do is open up our demo store over here, which we've now equipped with the new Assemblies functionality. You're going to notice now this over here. So as you head into replenishment, when you select assemblies, there's going to be a slightly different view. Really, the introduction of this assemblies cycle concept is one of funky. There we go. All right. So for our existing users, we're going to talk a little bit about that updated process as it relates to assemblies. But before that, as we have a lot of newer users as well that are either attending this call or going to be viewing this after the fact, I just want to take a step back and talk about some core concepts here. So one of these is going to be related to just the idea of bundles and assemblies in general. What are they? So anything with components basically is going to fit into one category or another here. And actually, yeah, just to make sure my bandwidth is good, I will stop the video. It should actually allow it to be a little smoother. And if it does get choppy at any point, if I should repeat anything, just let me know and I'll make sure to go back over. But basically, bundles and components is the simpler concept here. This is basically saying anything that we can sell. I have 100 shirts. I could sell them as 5-packs. So I could sell them as 10 packs. So I have 10 10-packs. I've got 25 packs. I've got 100 individual shirts. It's just all different ways of selling that stock. So if a customer comes and buys a 5-pack, I have 19 5-packs left. There's 95 individual shirts left. So basically, that's the concept. These can be referred to as kits or virtual bundles. It's different ways of selling components. And so the way that we set up that relationship differs. Now, if you are using an inventory management system, you'll notice on our integrations page from our homepage, select on your connection. And depending on that connection, if you're using an inventory management system, there's a good chance we're already picking up these bundle component relationships. And we'll even be able to tell if something is a bundle or an assembly automatically from those systems. However, for other systems, if you're connected directly through Shopify, for example, or Magento or an e-commerce store, we may not see that detail automatically. So you may need to very well configure bundles and components. Now, so that's always a good place to start, is just checking what kind of details are we getting automatically. If you see that, okay, there is a green check mark, we're understanding bundle and component relationships, or even for some systems, we're going to see that there are components and we're just going to classify them initially as bundle component relationships and then give you an opportunity to reclassify them later if you need to. That's where this table can really start to be useful to get a sense of what we may or may not be seeing automatically already. Now, in the case of bundles, like I said, it's a simpler relationship here. There's different ways we can sell individual shirts. If we head over to the replenishment screen, and if I were to look up a component variant, now whether I go and I look up that specific item, you can always just copy paste in here, press enter to see like a specific item. Or you could search by keyword, many different ways to adjust the filters there. We could also select filters. There's different ways to view. Your component variants are all going to live in this variants view. You won't see the bundles because there's different ways of selling the components by definition. So if I want to see my bundle components, anything that is a component of a bundle, I could apply that filter. I'm going to see my t-shirts, and I'm going to see also the components of a gift set that we have configured. So here's that t-shirt, or I can even see components of a specific bundle. So I'm in the variants view. I add the filter bundle to look at components of a specific bundle. Here's that 5-pack. Here's my individual shirt. It's just going to narrow down to this one shirt in the table. And if I click the details icon open here, notice in the forecast details, we see 2 lines in the past sales. So we're showing you how many shirts were sold in the form of a 5-pack and how many were sold overall, because we also sell individual shirts on their own. We've pushed all those sales. There's another tab up here, bundles and production tab. So as a refresher, I came to the details icon in here. By default, so you'll see the forecast and replenishment details, and there's a bundles and production tab. And this will actually show you that breakdown. How many shirts in April? We sold 314 shirts on their own. We sold another 1,390 shirts in the form of 5-packs. 1,390, I'm gonna bring my calculator here, 1,390 divided by 5. So we sold 278 5-packs, multiply that by 5 to say how many shirts did we sell in the form of 5-packs, and added together the shirts sold on their own. So we've pushed all those sales together, all those past sales. We can toggle from the past sales to the forecast. So whatever we sold in 5-packs, or if there were 10-packs or 20-packs, whatever it might be, we're pushing all the sales down to the component level here and then generating that forecast based on all those combined sales. So that's what's happening with bundles. We won't see those bundles in this table because the idea is the replenishment and forecasting should take place at the component level. So we're going to see only the component variants in the replenishment screen by default. We still be able to report if you go to your KPIs, for example, and maybe you want to pull in a KPI report and you just want to understand how did your bundles sell. It doesn't block you from getting that kind of detail here. So I can come over to KPIs. I could actually click to see bundles in this case. And then in my last, maybe last month, I want to get a sense, how did my bundles actually sell? So you can always still pull these types of reports. It doesn't stop you from doing that. The actual replenishment analysis and forecasting will take place at the component variant. In a nutshell, our article if you haven't seen the updates there already, I'm just going to show you a quick shortcut to get there. the icon here at the bottom right, the chat icon. You can search bundles and then basically open up this article, and it's going to walk you through all of the really core details about this process. Of course, the forecasting and replenishment, but it's going to give you some really key details about configuring, and it's actually hyperlinked. So you can click configuring bundles. It'll kind of walk you through what's going on here with bundles. What do you need to keep in mind for an inventory management system? We may see this information automatically. So this will help really explain it in the context of your integration. But what's really, really, really important to keep in mind, specifically in the context of bundles, now, whether it's this gift set with our bag and belts, whether it's this 5-pack, I just want to be very explicit about this, that if you have 100 shirts and that means you have 25 packs and a customer goes and buys a 5-pack, so your store is taking the stock of the 5-pack from 20 to 19. So how is your stock going to get adjusted from 100 to 95 in terms of your individual shirts? Inventory planner is not going to handle that piece. Your inventory management system will handle stock adjustments based on customer sales to make sure the stock gets adjusted here whenever this sells. If you're not using a full-fledged inventory management system, you may be able to find a third-party app that can offer that service. One in particular that you could consider is the Bundles app by Gazebo. Specifically, it works well for Shopify customers here. You'll see under, actually, if you were to scroll on this table, look at bundles and assemblies. If you use the Bundles by Gazebo app, it does precisely that. Somebody buys the 5-pack, so it's going to make sure the stock of the component gets adjusted as well. You could just connect the bundles by the Bundles app by Gazebo for free to Inventory Planner. You'll notice in account settings, when you go to add a new connection, basically, you'll see that as an option, Bundles by Gazebo, so you can add it there. We would pick up those details. You'll find them in catalog bundles automatically. The forecasting and replenishment will push the sales to the components. All of that will happen automatically. But the Bundles app will be the piece that will adjust your stock based on your customers buying those products. Or again, your inventory management system. Just keep in mind in general that Inventory Planner is not adjusting your stock based on customer sales, since we are not your inventory management system. From our perspective, bundle component relationships is really based in the forecasting and replenishment. We want to understand if there's different ways you're selling something. We're taking all the relevant sales and pushing it down to the thing you're actually going to be placing orders on. That's the main idea here that I wanted to discuss. I'm seeing our chat boxes going up a little bit. Jill, have you already hit on answers, or is there anything in particular I should explain here?
I think we're good, mostly just linking to things you're talking about. Tim did have a question on the replenishment screen when it shows total, meaning regular plus bundles. Does bundles also include assemblies? So I just clarified that it does not. Assemblies will be separate from that. I think within details.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when you see own sales plus bundles, assemblies will be separate.
Yeah. So assemblies, that's where we're going to go to next. Bundles is the simpler relationship. It's a redistribution of sales down to the components. So the forecasting and replenishment analysis takes place at the component level, because it's all just different ways of selling this stuff, right? We just want to make sure we order enough components that sometimes all customers need. Then you start to come up with your lead time and days of stock, trusting that all relevant sales are taking place here. Now, it may very well be the case that, I'll say that you can have bundle relationships. You can have bundles of bundles, so like nested bundle relationships, and the sales of 10 packs informs the 5-packs, informs the singles. You can also have assembly component relationships, nested assembly relationships, or you could have an assembly that's made up of a bundle that's made up of components. These are all options, but what's critical is understanding the difference of how this is going to look when you're in terms of your forecasting and replenishment as it relates to bundles versus assemblies. So let's dig a little deeper there. In the context of assemblies, what the main thing to keep in mind is you're not going to see this redistribution of sales. We're going to come up with a forecast and replenishment analysis for assembled goods, and that's going to inform some replenishment. But you may not see anything. So I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. Our assemblies, I'm going to go back to our catalog actually over here. Catalog, let's go over to assemblies. So Now, again, if depending on your configuration, some systems are going to tell us automatically if something's made to order in Syn 7. If it's auto assembly is not enabled, we understand this is something we have to put together in advance. The stock of components is actually separate than the stock of the assemblies. So here I am in assemblies. I'm going to first look at a simpler one. Our large office tables, we sell these in our store. It's an assembled good. We have to take 4 table legs, take a tabletop, reduce the stock of that because now we're putting it into production and we're building large office tables. I realize I'm talking a lot with my hands, but I turned the video off. But just imagine the hands. So we have large office tables. This is the thing we're selling. And then we have table legs and tabletops that we're using to put that together. If we go back to replenishment, and it's the same idea with filters, I could either see my components of assemblies, anything that is the component of an assembly, or more directly, I want to see specifically the components of my large office table. This is what I really want to focus on here. So I have large tabletops, I have large table legs. So what are we seeing here? So I want to open another instance here under replenishment, but I want to switch over to the assemblies view. All right. Now I'm going to have both of these tabs open next to each other. So I can see my assembly. I want to focus even on my large office table here, just so we have them all next to each other. So here's catalog, large office table with the components. Here is that assembly. Here are the components. Notice, first and foremost, there's an assemblies view, and that's because the stock by definition of components versus assemblies is separate. We have to use components to put together assemblies, and there's this fluctuation of stock. It's not all tied together in the same that would be with variants and bundles, which is why you don't see a bundles view here by default. Whereas the rest of these drop-down selections are actually just different ways of viewing. Products are different ways of viewing variants and assemblies or vendors, brands. Those are all very different aggregations of that data. If we're doing it at the vendor level, if I take that filter off, if we do it at the category level, if we do it at the total store level, notice we even see it's like, oh, you're looking at 93 variants or 1 bundle or 2. It's like different ways of looking at it, but it's really coming down to these 93 variants and the 2 assemblies that are informing what we see at the vendor level in this case. Let's go back to that specific assembly though. So we can go to the assemblies view and focus on this one particular assembly. And so what we're going to see in here, first and foremost, is we sell large office tables. I can click open this details icon. I can see past sales. We're coming up with a forecast. We're using the forecast method and settings to come up with the forecasted sales. You could make forecast adjustments. We're going to sell 500 tables in December, or whatever you might do, just as you usually would with your forecasting. So first and foremost, that's where all of this starts, is how does the assembly itself sell? So now we made some adjustments to the forecast. We feel pretty good about this. So we have to understand, what is the planning period? I mean, the forecast can go on indefinitely, right? It can go, we're seeing it through this period. I could reset the zoom, and it's going to go on for as long as it needs to. So we have to define a planning period. And it used to happen at both levels, which started to create a little confusion. So the idea was that we want to centralize this in one place. So the way that you actually set up a planning period is at the component level. It's telling the system, yes, we're going to give you recommendations on what to assemble. If you have some component stock to work with today, we'll get you started. But we want to get a sense of, if you were to start from scratch, well, the reality is maybe it takes me like 30 days to get tabletops. It takes me 90 days to get table legs. Actually, I'm going to flip it around to be more realistic. Tabletops are probably more rare. We can get table legs more frequently. And then our days, what we're going to do is use the lead time and the days of stock at the component level is ultimately going to inform what's happening at the assembly. So if it takes me 90 days to get tabletops, I want to make sure I can cover my needs at least for 90 days. And just to be consistent, I want to make sure that I'm using 90 days here levels. And so now notice we're going to start seeing replenishment recommendations here at the component level. So what happened is we defined a planning period. If we had no components, if we had 0 table legs and tabletops, we had to order some in from scratch, how long is it going to take? And how much ideally would we have coverage for? And we're taking the greatest possible length of that period. In this case, we have a longer lead time for tabletops. So we want that 90 days of coverage. So we're saying, okay, in this case, the furthest out date is March 7th here. And if we come back to assemblies, I'm going to refresh. Notice what happens here. Components lead time, we took the greatest of the lead times that we see at the component level. We took the greatest of the days of stock that we see, which is 90 in either case, to define how far out that planning period is for assemblies. So first and foremost, we know, okay, we want to produce enough, we want to recommend in terms of replenishment, this is what we're focusing on, is enough to get you out to March 7th. That is informing this replenishment figure of the 1,066. What we're going to do is break that down based on a cycle that you input. So if I said I'm doing this on a weekly basis, I'm producing tables. So it's not going to change the replenishment number. What it does is it changes the breakdown. Here's what we need to produce. We're going to produce 3 right now, September 8th, because we can. We have some tabletops. And then it's going to take us a little while to get more. Once we get them in 60 days from now, some more tabletops, then we can get back into a weekly routine. Produce 113 in December. That'll cover us for 7 days. I increased the forecast in December of our large office table. So that's why it's a little higher in these weekly and the increments, and then it kind of tapers off. So we're breaking it down on a weekly basis until, notice March 1st is the last one, produce 72, covers you up until March 7th. So we're using the lead time, the planning period itself is for both levels is defined at the component level. Take the greatest of the lead time and days to stock and help us understand it's, and now if I were to click out of here, I X'd it out, I can't find it. So now what's also really nifty is that if we just want to go quickly find that, I'm just going to open it in a new tab. Components lead time, here's my components. So we can easily click through to them. Or if I do it in the same screen, components days of stock, here's the components. I can make the adjustments to the lead time, the days of stock. If I went to the stock allocated for assemblies, here's my large tabletop. I want to go back to the assemblies view, just look at assemblies that are connected with that component. So we can click and go back and forth between them, which is really, really helpful. But that's the main idea here. It's really just giving us a sense of how to break that down. Now, I want to just, that at the core, like that's what's happening here. Our assemblies, if I click into the details icon, now we're breaking these recommendations down into weekly cycles. We've told the system, just as usual with our forecast settings, we don't accept back orders. I could turn that setting off. I could customize my forecast settings for this SKU. I could turn this off, and we would forecast for the back orders if it's relevant. Actually, if I save this, you'll see that behavior. I'll just save it real quick. I'll come back to replenishment forecast. Notice now during this lead time, we're waiting for new components. Now we're allowing back orders to take place. So we actually need enough to fulfill all these back orders as well. Maybe we can actually do that. So that's what we'll go back to our default settings. It changes that behavior. It says, okay, now actually we can't really, once we sell out of these 4 tables we have now, we can't really do much here. We go out of stock today at the rate of sale. We're selling 10 a day. Well, we go out of stock today. We can't really do anything until we get the new component stock in, and then we get some assemblies going. So we said, okay, if by December 7th, you assemble another 113, it's going to take your stock up. Here on December 8th, it'll cover you for 7 days. And then you produce another 113, it covers you for another 7 days. And we rinse and repeat through the rest of that days of stock period. So it's really the whole narrative of what's happening here with the stock. Once we can get it in, that's that production schedule that we're going to come up with. Now, also, if we just want to see the schedule itself kind of broken out, there's a report that we've built in here is the assembly schedule report. So if I open this tab now, the assembly schedule report, and I can see my large office table. I'm just going to narrow down to this one view here. Right now, we're looking at it by month. We could even break it down by week, but this would give us a sense. How many large office tables do we need to assemble? I can change the period exactly that I'm looking at, but it's going to correspond with what I saw on that other table. And you can export this out to CSV. And soon, you'll be the first to know that this will be schedulable. We'll be adding a button here soon at the bottom. Just stay tuned in the next few weeks here. You'll see an ability to actually schedule this to be sent to your email automatically on some recurring basis. On the first Monday, give you a sense, what is your assembly schedule report going to look like? How does that break down? But in the meantime, it's the same idea. You can come here anytime as you set that up, export this out to CSV. All right, that's what's happening at the parent assembly level. What I want to do is go into the components. I'm just going to click here into the lead time. Now we see our component variants of the assembly once this reloads. And let's look at tabletops first. All right, we have 6 of them in stock, but we need a lot more for the assemblies that we're looking at here. If I click into the details icon, it's being informed by what's happening at the parent level. And we notice there's no forecasted sales here. We don't sell tabletops on their own. That's what I was trying to explain earlier. So in the case of bundles, the 5-pack shirt versus the single shirt, well, you're seeing all the sales there for the single shirt. In this case, the stock and sales are separate by definition. We don't sell the tabletops on their own. The replenishment is informed by the parent assemblies. If I went over to that bundles and production tab over here, it's letting me know, hey, this tabletop, it's part of the large office table. We know we want 1,066 of them in order to cover our needs through the end of our planning period. We're going to break that down into whatever cycle, but ultimately we're going to need 1,066 of these tabletops. So we're setting them aside in order to, so that's the stock allocated for assemblies. We need 1,066. We only have 6 tables in stock today, so we need 1,060. It's the difference. We need this many, we have this many. If there was anything on order, we would net it out, and that's what's going to come up with our replenishment here. Now, from here, basically, I want to explain something that's come up with a few customers that you may very well run into without going to, actually, here, Jill, I see a little smile here. So if we have a question, I should redirect. I don't want to get too crazy with this, but there's something.
No, I think I know where you're going with this, and a question popped up from Lindsay. She was just wondering if you could show an example of a different assembly cycle time, either smaller or larger than 7 days. So I think that you were going to dig into some assembly time variations there. So take it away. That was Lindsay's question.
Cool. Yeah. So let's go back to our assemblies view. Now, one thing I also wanted to mention, notice with our 10-pack cookies, right? If we go back to catalog, our 10 packs are made up of 10 cookies, which is made up of 0.01 kilograms of flour, which is made up of 10 kilograms of flour. So it's like a nested assembly. Each thing is still an assembly. Like these 3 things are still technically assembly. So they're represented above in here as well. Just something to keep in mind as you're navigating that table. If you're wondering why they're showing up multiple times, each of them are technically assemblies, even if they're assembly within another assembly. That starts to get more nuanced, which is why I like to look at this office table example, because I think it demonstrates just assembly to component what happens. As you have nested assemblies, 10 packs, notice the component, notice the lead times on those actually changes a little bit. So the flour, we're looking, all we need is the bulk flour. We're using the default 1430. That's what we see for components for every single component in the demo store. That's where everything starts in terms of lead time days of stock. That's what we're going to see here. And in the assemblies view, notice it's 1 day higher for cookies. Well, that is because once we get the flour, it takes 1 day to assemble flour. So it's added to the lead time of cookies. It's like once we get the bulk flour, it takes us a day to assemble a kilogram of flour, which doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. Like this specific example, why it might take a day. It could be 0. Maybe the reality is we don't even need to assemble flour. We just get it, right? We just, set it up however we want. So now this says, oh, okay. So it's all same day. Now cookie, the lead time is the same. However, it does their cookies Maybe every, like, it's going to take me 3 days. These are really good cookies. I mean, we really pour our heart and soul into this. And then so basically, Jill, I'm looking to you to just laugh at all my bad jokes to make sure they're landing here. So just a heads up.
I know how good
So
you
notice
are at
for the
baking and cooking. So this is all very accurate. Yes.
So now notice now what happens. Okay, we get that flour in. We can break it down into 1 kilogram, the 10 kilogram down to a kilogram same day. But then it takes us a few days to actually put the cookies together. And because of that, the lead time has changed on our 10 packs. It's the time of getting our raw ingredients, breaking it down in the same day, and then taking the extra 3 days to make cookies lets us understand, oh, wow, actually it's an even longer lead time. So it's extending out that planning period. So that's what's going to happen when you have a nested assembly structure. But to demonstrate one specific kind of circumstance that you might run into, I want to focus back in on that large office table example, because I've noticed this here a couple times. So a couple questions that have come up is one is, I don't really, I don't need to break it down on this schedule. We decided this is the more intuitive way. Generally, like, we're noticing that merchants typically want to create some kind of schedule, but maybe you don't. You just want to know how many assemblies are you going to need overall. So the simplest type of scenario is, okay, we have some components. Let's just say they're all kind of the same lead time, same days of stock. We're going to say 90 days overall. Make everything the same. All right. So the planning period is always equivalent. If I go back to my large office table here, and so if I set the assembly cycle up to be exactly the same as the days of stock in that case of the components, we're not going to see the breakdown. Basically, we're just going to say, oh, okay, you do see a few different in here, and it's just because we don't have enough components yet to get everything we need. 60 days from now, assemble as much as we can. That would cover our needs for 90 days. I guess we do have this residual one that is like, we need enough just to cover that one day. Actually, if we made that 91 days, in fact, that last one will go away. So the idea is it's going to chunk it into like, what is the, we want to just put these together. We don't need to break it down into some schedule or anything. So typically, as long as your day, like your days of stock inputs are equal at the component level, then setting your, sorry, I got to reset the columns here. If you set the days of stock equal to the assembly cycle plus 1, I guess in this case, then that's what's going to happen. You'll be able to kind of chunk your recommendations. You'll get either 1 or 2 recommendations. If you have tons of existing component stock, you'll see a recommendation. Assemblies right now. If you don't have enough, you'll see multiple recommendations only if we need to wait and order more components to fulfill the total requirement. So that's the quick answer on like how, if you don't need to break it down into a schedule, that's what you do. Now, if let's say I had a customer here who maybe there's a really long lead time for our tabletops. It takes 150 days, and we just want to carry more stock because of that. So it's like 270 days. So it changes the nature of the recommendation. And I want to explain what happens. Like, why does this happen? First, I'm going to go back to Assemblies, and I'm going to refresh the screen. So the first thing is, well, now we see something has a longer lead time in days of stock. So the entire planning period itself has now extended because something has changed. When we're understanding that of the components, one of them takes 150 days. Of the days of stock, we need more coverage for one. So we're borrowing the greatest of these figures to define a planning period. And now we're essentially, we're creating suggestions, we're breaking it down, in this case in a 91-day cycle. Let's say I even want to make it like the 270 days. I want everything to be more or less equal. So this is an exact kind of case that happened to the customer. Notice the replenishment didn't even change. The breakdown changes. So what happens here, and what they were asking, because generally, yeah, like that's what happens. If you set the assembly cycle equal to the days of stock, you shouldn't really see a change in replenishment. But the problem was, look at where right now what the table leg is, and it says 7124. I expect actually if I refresh a lot higher than that. unless it already updated automatically in the back end while we weren't looking. Nope, there it is. It's much, much, much higher. So the customer is saying, why is this happening? Why did the replenishment jump up significantly? So the reason this is happening is because one of the components has a longer period, and it's informing the planning period of the assembly. So the replenishment itself, I mean, it's regardless of what we're setting assembly cycle at this point. I mean, now if we said we want to break it down in monthly increments, it's not going to change the total replenishment. We want to assemble 3 right now. We're going to break it down on a monthly basis. So it doesn't really change any of that. But what it is going to change, like let's say, so if I did say, if I brought it back to 270 days of stock, so again, it's the same kind of idea here, but if we're trying to break this down into 270-day increments, well, that in itself is greater than the entire days of stock of this component. So essentially it's overriding the behavior of the component, because it's, you know, we need enough components to cover our needs all the way through November 2nd. So even though we set up our days of stock to only go through March 7th in terms of table legs, what we set it up at the assembly level is driving some additional behavior. Like we regardless of what you're doing here at the component level, we need enough to get us all the way out to November 2nd because of what we're setting at the assembly level. So, I mean, it's just important to understand that behavior. I think it does, computers ultimately do at the end of the day what we tell them to do. If we use a shorter assembly cycle here, then it doesn't really, we're not going to see the same issue. So notice the same replenishment here. I'll refresh this. We're going to get some slightly different numbers. Well, because now we broke it down into 30-day cycles. So in terms of our table legs, it went way down. And now we can actually honor this planning period because the cycle is less than the entire length of the planning period for this component. So now we're just going to break this down. We're understanding every 30 days we need to commit some stock for the parent assembly. And we're just going to do that in this case through March 7th, which is how we set up the days of stock period for the component. So it's actually doing what we've intended here. And we could do that all the way up until basically, yeah, I mean, if we, that's kind of the main idea I wanted to demonstrate here. It's just typically, yeah, I guess without going in too many circles with it, is that making sense? What questions are coming up here? I see that, again, the chat box is going up a little bit. So
all good. Yeah. Tim outed himself as the customer you were talking about. So he was just saying props to the support team. I think, Basil, that was specifically you for walking him through that in detail. And that sounds like it's solving his problem. But Tim, chime in if you still have questions about that, either here in this session or with your support ticket that's open. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, and the too long didn't read idea there. So just like your couple rules of thumb here as it relates to assembly cycle, lead time, days of stock. If you don't want to break it down into a schedule, set your days. I mean, the more that you can keep your days of stock pretty consistent, the less kind of erratic behavior you're going to see. And then if you use the same days of stock there as your assembly cycle, generally, whatever you set for your assembly cycle, I mean, it should chunk those recommendations as we discussed, so you don't really see them. But you want to do the assembly cycle plus the extra assembly time. That actually breaks it down distinctly into what you should produce now, what you should produce when you get that component stock. It just gets a little funky if you have varying days of stock levels at the component level. Okay, so that is the main idea there. One of the main benefits that you're going to also notice is that now this actually allows us to forecast sells out in and replenishment driven metrics at the component level. So in the past, especially if you had too much component stock as it is, so let's say actually we want to lessen this period. I'm just actually going to say those default 14, 30 days. There was a problem that used to take place where if you have settings like this, notice, well, okay, in that case, you know, if I refresh this, our assembly, let's see, our assembly cycle is too long in this case. Let's make it 30 days so it's consistent. All right, so in this case, yeah, we need 316. We have plenty of table legs to do that. We don't really have enough tabletops, so we have a replenishment recommendation for tabletops. When we have 6, we need 316, so let's get more tabletops. Pretty straightforward. Table legs, we have over 2,000. We need 1,788. Okay, why do we need 1,788? I can click into the details icon. It doesn't sell on its own. I go to the bundles production tab. We need 316 large office tables and 4 legs per table. So 1,264 just for large. And then these are also part of small tables. We didn't look at the replenishment analysis there, but it's the same. 131 times 4 is 524. We add that together to come up with the stock allocated for assemblies, which is still less than what we have. So basically, we used to say then this goes on indefinitely because you have enough to cover your planning period. You don't need replenishment. So this would say 540 days, which is the cap basically. Now we will actually, with these changes, it allows us to come up with the sells out. Even if you're overstocked in theory, we can plan for the future assemblies that would take place beyond that planning period to give you a sense of when you're actually going to run out of stock. So just a nice little bonus there, especially if you've been using assemblies. We have some customers who are kind of wondering about the changes. Well, this is now giving you much better replenishment and sells out in metrics at the component level, which you didn't get before. It's consolidating, so you're really only managing your lead time and days of stock in the component view. It just ties back to assembly. And then in the assemblies view, you're focusing on fields that are specific to assemblies. How long does it take to put it together? That's the assembly time. And then what is my production cycle, the assembly cycle? How often am I actually putting these together? So you're managing different settings in the different screens. It's generally much more intuitive, and you can click back and forth between them. Overall, just generally is a simpler experience. But what's really important, especially if you've been using assemblies and you're new to, and something changed in recent days, it's because of that. Existing customers, because if you had 30 days of stock at if you had 30 days of stock at the component level and you had 30 days of stock at the assembly level, because you were managing days of stock at both levels, we weren't sure which to pick, because now you're just managing it in one place, which ultimately is better, but we needed everybody to define what is the assembly cycle in this case. So we forced some alerts there to make sure that it works with the new process, which ultimately streamlines and simplifies things. That's a lot there on the forecasting and replenishment, on bundles and assemblies. What's our next poll question here? I know I haven't thrown one in here in a bit.
Quick question while you're here. We had a question from Sam quickly, just saying, how do we know how much of each component to order? So if you could just flip over to the variance view and show that. So here on the variance view, you'll look, so we're on the replenishment screen, you'll look at the replenishment column. That's going to be the number of those components to order. And then what's on the assembly screen, if you have nested assemblies, that's everything kind of upstream from there. But the variant view shows you this should be the most granular level. This is what goes on your purchase order. So here's what to focus on to get those components in stock. Poll question. Yeah, let's go over here. All right, so next question is, how do you track component variance? So this kind of goes back to what Basil was talking about earlier with, are you using an inventory or management system or order management system? Maybe you're just on something like Shopify. There's kind of a workaround to use hidden products there, or maybe you were looking for Inventory Planner to do that. So getting a little feedback on that one as well.
And I'm very glad to see that we have a lot of users that are already working through inventory management systems. It does help to streamline your experience in Inventory Planner, especially from an assemblies and bundles perspective. But for customers that are actively trying to figure that out, if you're not using an inventory management system, that is the recommendation. Just build some hidden products in the e-commerce store. They won't be published in the store, but they'll create the product. So when it syncs to Inventory Planner, we see them. You're not generally creating products and deleting products within Inventory Planner. That's why we say that, just so you can manage the creation of products in one system.
Perfect. All right. Have
that
you
might
already
be there.
touched? Yeah, have you already touched on the assembly schedule? Sorry if I missed that while I was typing something else. The assembly order schedule in reports.
Yep, I can go back over that.
Cool.
Yeah, so however you set up your assembly schedule, if we came back here, I want to reset it as it was. So we had our large office table. What we're going to do here, let's say again, we want to cover our needs for a longer period of time for 90 days.
Specifically, I meant under reports, the page that's all the schedules.
Yep. I wanted to create a longer period, so it creates. Yeah. So say first, if we did that, this is just a quick refresh. So that increases the replenishment. There's more assemblies that we're going to need to do on a whatever basis. So now we're going to say we do it either on a monthly or in this case, a weekly basis. I'm going to assemble every 7 days. Here's the way we're going to break it down. So this will correspond with the assemblies report. Under reports, assembly schedule, and come to this report. If you look at the assemblies, here's our large office table. Here's what we're going to need to assemble each month. And if I break it down by week, it's going to correspond with what we saw on that screen. So I can assemble 3 right away. It's going to take me a couple weeks to get more components, and then I'm going to assemble X amount each week. Now I could also go to the variance view in here. I could find components. I look at my assembly components. What am I going to see for table legs, for tabletops, is the units allocated for assemblies. To make it crystal clear, let's look at components that are part of one specific assembly. Our large office table. Notice what's going on here. We're allocating tabletops on a weekly basis for tabletops to align with our assembly schedule, and it's ×4 for the table legs, right? Plus whatever else we need to allocate for the small office tables in this case. But you can see that either for how are you allocating your component variants for assemblies, or what are you assembling at the assembly level. If you have nested assemblies, keep in mind you might see levels of both. Cookies are needed to assemble into 10 packs, and we need to assemble them on their own, right? Oh, sorry, units allocated for assemblies. That's what we need to allocate for 10 packs. That's why it's rounded. We need to assemble this many cookies in order to assemble this many 10 packs is what's going on. So you'll notice that with a nested structure. All right, were there other questions?
Yeah, we have a question from Lindsay. Do components that are included in completed assemblies count in the stock amounts, or are those depleted from the stock? So
component stock that is already in assemblies is not considered available stock. You'll see it as the stock in assemblies. Let me see if it's the case here with any of our current components. It may just not be the case in our demo store, but it certainly would be in your store. But basically, if I have, yeah, there we go. So for large tabletops, these 4 are not available. So I actually have 10 tabletops. 4 of them are already part of existing assemblies. 6 can be used for new assemblies, is what that's saying. I have almost 32. I have over 3,200 table legs. Only 2,000 of them are available. The rest are already in tables.
Yeah, so on that point, just following up, when you're creating an assembly order, so if you can sync that assembly order to your inventory management system, obviously that's where you're going to control the stock levels of both the completed assemblies and the components. If you're using something like Shopify, I think probably everybody on this call maybe has seen, when you're receiving a purchase order, you have the option to increase stock of what you've received on a purchase order. Similarly, on an assembly order, you can increase stock of the completed assembly while also decreasing stock of that component. So just making sure that those are keeping in check where the stock level at the component level or variant level is really reflecting what's available for assemblies or sale. It is not including what's already put into completed assemblies.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's a great segue. Let's talk a little bit about assembly orders, purchase orders. Does that sound good, or anything in particular you want to? Okay.
Yep, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So I'm back in the assemblies view. Now we configured everything. We know we want to break it down in weekly increments. Well, great. We can make 3 tabletops today. Now, one thing I actually want to quickly explain, this might be really helpful to anybody who has Amazon connected in particular. Notice with the tabletops, it's like, well, why only create 3 if I have 6? Well, once I actually expand this out, notice that the 3 of them are in an Amazon warehouse. So we've set this up automatically to say that they cannot be used for assembly. We're focusing on what's not at an Amazon warehouse to say what's available. We said, okay, of those, great. Let's use those 3 that are sitting in that Shopify UK warehouse. Let's create 3 today. So from there, we can make selections. You could do this for numerous assemblies at once, but what we can do is select and then create an assembly order, or select numerous assemblies and I'll add them to an assembly order. By default, we're saying, okay, it takes place in the same warehouse. I'm assembling it here. It takes a day to assemble. So that's defining when we would complete the order by. If I click to the components, it's telling me the components that I need. I'm getting errors because it's my Shopify US warehouse. It's just the one I selected. So I'm saying, oh, okay, my bad. Here's where I'm actually gonna assemble them. My error went away. Now I can produce these 3 using these components. I have plenty of legs. It's just I'm throttled by the tabletops. So we can create this assembly order. What happens with this assembly order? You'll see it in the stock orders tab. You're going to notice these orders start with the letter A, but also if you use filters and you filter by type, you can see what's an assembly order versus a PO versus anything else. So assembly orders, you can narrow down with that filter. That expected date, September 9th, is going to inform the replenishment. So if I go back to replenishment and I look back in my assembly view, now that I create an assembly order, we're going to see that we have some goods that are on assembly. Now it's actually hidden. If you don't see the column, open up that gear icon in the top right. I'm just resetting my columns. It'll show it actually here. So we have 3 on assembly. I can click on those 3, see which assembly order they're attached to. It's that assembly order. They're scheduled to come September 9th. Now it's going to be part of my forecasting analysis. We will update accordingly. Notice large office tables. The next assembly now is 71 on September 22nd, because we've already set up the first one. So if I went to create another assembly order, it would set it for the future. September 22nd, it's going to say here, and then it would complete it a day later. So that it would just get to the next assembly essentially on that point. In terms of the management of an assembly order, what happens if you're using an inventory management system? All right, here's that assembly order. I'm just going to make the symbols type assembly order. If you're using an inventory management system, check our integrations page from our home page. This will let you know. So if you go over to the right, if you create an assembly order based on recommendations in Inventory Planner, can you save it to your inventory management system? If it's green, yes. So if you create it, you'll see a prompt. Hey, we could save this to SYN7. You would receive the assembly order there in SYN7. They would decrease your component stock, increase your assembly stock, and close out the order. Those details would come back. We'd see, oh, okay, this is closed. Maybe we would see the stock changes directly from SYN7. If we cannot send this to an inventory management system, you can receive within Inventory Planner. So if you're connected just through Shopify like we are here, we could receive directly in the software. We could save it. It closes the assembly order. Now we have the option to increase the assembly stock in the Shopify store and to decrease the component stock, which we could do anytime. Similarly, for the purchase order side, let's say I'm going to I'm just going to delete this one. Now you can email this, you can export PDF. Regardless, you're managing it in your inventory management system or an inventory planner, you'll always be able to access those POs and print and do whatever you like. It's the actual receiving and management of changes. That's where this will really dictate. If you can start that process in Inventory Planner, save it to your system, you manage everything there. Otherwise, like Shopify, you create the assembly order in Inventory Planner, you receive it, and then we offer you the opportunity to increase and or decrease the stock in your store, respectively, based on what was just assembled. Or you just go to Shopify and make the stock changes. So maybe you have another warehouse management system. That's fine too. You could export the recommendations. After you've made the stock changes, you still want to receive and close inventory plan, oh, hey, stock increased and you still have more on assembly. That's what we want to avoid. So just be careful for that. For the purchase order side, so let's say we go back to replenishment. I go to my variants, my assembly components. We know that we need some goods. What do we need here? We need table legs. We need tabletops. So we can select, we can create purchase orders, and then we'll look at your catalog to populate the details from there. A lot of that, again, if you're using an inventory management system, it's likely the case already that we're getting vendor details, vendor reference details, units of measurement, any of that we're going to get from your catalog automatically and apply that to these orders. If we know we have to order at least 2,000 tabletops, we're going to get an error here. Oops, 2,000. That type of thing. And then we can create the purchase order, and it's the same idea. If you are working through an inventory management system and we're able to support syncing of purchase orders to and from systems, you always manage your receiving in the other system. You would just see a prompt here that allows you to save it there. Otherwise, you manage your receiving in inventory planner. If and only if that function is not supported and you're connected through an e-commerce software, that would be the goal. One last thing I want to mention, if I have the 2 minutes here, or is there something really special we should hit?
I have just a couple things at the very end, but carry on. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make this part fast. Large office tables, we get some customers that do not carry component stock. They have to order the components and then they just assemble them immediately. So there's a quick shortcut I want to show you for that. Again, you can find this in that bundles assemblies article. There's a section that says save time. So just look for that section if you need a recap. But basically the idea, large office tables. So we know we need 3, or whatever this might look like. Actually, we're going to need 1,073 really is what we need to get us all the way through the end of that period. And since we don't carry the component stock anyway, let's just select this. But instead of creating an assembly order, I just want to use this to quickly create a PO for the components. So there's a drop down here. If there are multiple vendors or anything, we need to create multiple POs. You would go through the batch stock order process. But I'm just going to say we're going to quickly create one purchase order to one vendor to keep it simple. It'd be the same idea though. And what do we get a prompt? Are we ordering the assembly as it is, or are we ordering the components? Well, we're going to order the components. So we're replacing the replenishment. We said basically, in order to create 1,073 tables, we need this many tables, this many table legs. Quickly create a PO for that amount. Okay, there it is. We create the PO. And since we did it with that process based on assemblies replenishment, once the PO is created, you'll see an assemblies button on that same PO that allows you to quickly create the assembly order based on everything you just received. So that's if you don't really carry the component stock, all the components you're ordering, you're using to put into assemblies. This would allow you to just quickly set up that workflow. You created the PO, you received the PO, you created the assembly order from that PO, and now here's that assembly order, and so on. All right, that was all.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Lots of great information. A couple quick things. We are recording this session today, so we'll send out a recording later today. 2, I provided a link in the chat to a blog post that has links and details about more webinars, more educational sessions that we'll have yet this month. So be sure to check those out. We've got an action-packed month. One thing we're doing this month is partnering with the App Collective. So particularly for people on Shopify, but not exclusively so. It can be overwhelming to look at the App Store. And so this is like a curated group looking at best practices. Here are, a quick look at, if you have this problem, this can solve that problem for you. So that can be like a quick look at some different apps within the App Store within Shopify. So be sure to check those out as well. Thank you everybody for joining us. Feel free to either pop down in the chat if you have more questions after this, or reply to the email that will go out with the recording of this later today. We appreciate you joining us. Thanks everybody.